This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Coquitlam peoples.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicos. Today is January 8th, 2026.
I'm Scott Lundebohm.
And I'm Ian Bushfield. Happy New Year, Scott.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you too, and all the listeners.
Stuff didn't stop happening. It was supposed to.
Yeah, turns out in the couple weeks we took off between December 11th and now, there was an entire implosion of one of the BC political parties. And kind of a recovery-ish. Anyway, just when you thought the leadership drama and backstabbing was over, One BC came through to keep that going.
I wasn't even thinking about that. I was just thinking of the last week in global politics.
Oh, yeah.
At least, BC and federal politics after the One BC stuff kind of settled over the holidays and did the right thing of everyone just being chill for a few weeks, but man, the world did not. Yeah. Namely, America.
Yeah, the couple days after New Year's have been something almost makes you miss 2025.
Each year is worse than the last. We have lots to talk about, though. As we do at the start of every year, we like to look back and grade the predictions we made the previous year to see how bad we are at it. Then we do it again for next year and think about what will happen. And like you said, we got lots to catch up on. So we'll try and keep this show tight, both for our own sakes, our editor, and you listeners. But it's good to be back. Go to patreon.com/politicos if you want to support the show. Get in the patron Slack where the conversation never stopped. Let's start with what we guessed last year. Let's start with your predictions.
Yeah, so starting off, I predicted that Eby would end the year less popular than he started, that the continued slow decline of the NDP popularity, and particularly Eby's, would continue, and it's borne out. So going off Angel's Regis, that's what we tossed in the notes at the end of last year. He was at 46 and dropped down to 41.
Yeah, not actually a huge drop. Outside the margin of error. Kind of the safest prediction, probably. One of the safer predictions either of us made. But fair point. We both predicted a spring election. I said a late spring election, and I'll leave it to listeners to decide if April 28th counts as late spring.
It's right on the line.
Right. Google told me late spring is May, June, so I maybe missed it. But most people saw that coming. But neither of us guessed how that election was going to go.
Yeah, so for a little context, we recorded our first episode of last year when we did all the predictions on January 2nd. So at that point, Justin Trudeau was still hanging on. He'd not officially resigned, but he seemed pretty dead in the water. Mark Carney was...
The knives were in the back and twisted.
Yeah. Mark Carney was trying to distance himself from the whole replace Freeland thing that blew up and ended up being the thing that took Justin Trudeau down, or started the dominoes on that. So yeah, our election predictions were a little off on that. A bit of the result from where we were sitting right at the start of the year. I had a Conservative majority, which, based on the polling was a safe bet, but where things were really off was where I figured the other parties would be, of the Liberals doing worse than 2011, which, if things had gone straight line forward from January 2nd of 2025, there's a decent chance of hitting that. But obviously, big miss on that. Same thing with the Bloc getting official opposition, which was another one of my predictions.
I had predicted a Conservative minority, which was closer, but still wrong. And for the other parties, I had the Liberals dropping to fourth behind the NDP and bloc, which also obviously didn't happen. But you did have the NDP losing seats, which was the only accurate part of the election prediction for the two of us. Oh, I actually did say the Greens would be reduced to 1 seat and she would not resign, which, check.
We don't even have to say the name, just the she on that one's pretty self-explanatory. Elizabeth May didn't resign, although is in the process possibly of stepping down as federal leader. It's all confusing on that, so there's an arguable half point on the not resign, but...
She plans to run for re-election at least one more time, despite, she's a spry 71.
Yeah, my prediction of the NDP losing seats, I think, was a pretty safe one as well, considering both where they were polling and how just low energy and lackluster they were at that point.
Mm-hmm.
As far as other political predictions, we both weighed in on Newfoundland politics, even though neither of us have really any idea of how that province works. Taking opposite predictions of you thinking the NDP, or you thinking the Liberals would win, and I had the Conservatives on that.
And you got the point for it.
Yeah,
we split the odds.
The Conservatives, I think, had a surprisingly strong showing.
Yeah, I saw a couple coverage. I saw some coverage of it talking about like the shock on the rock. So good for them.
Yeah, the Liberals have been in power for a while, but I think at the start of last year they were still polling ahead, even if there was a degree of tiredness with them.
And then you also had the U.S. government shutting down, which did occur late in the year. Just getting it in there.
Well, it was happened like was it October? It was Q4, but it was not quite at the end. Oh God,
all of it blends together.
Yeah, it's been a crazy year in American politics. It's easy to forget what happened when, because it is all just one mess running together.
And you predicted a recession that we did not get.
Yeah, thankfully that was a miss. I'm a little surprised on that one, but things have, despite the trade war and everything, and the kind of lackluster growth in the preceding years, did technically stay out of a recession, so surprisingly resilient on Canada's part.
Always bet on real estate, and I guess in the US, AI bubbles to keep the economies going. One of those feels like a recession to a lot of people, but technically it's not, so we're okay.
Yeah, and you rounded out yours with a couple geopolitics related ones. Yeah.
More locally, I had a couple other local ones. I had I had several MLAs. For example, Eleanor Sturko leaving the BC Conservatives, and that was very accurate, both in the specific and the general. I tried to predict the BC Green leadership race with Jeremy Valeriote winning, and he didn't even enter the race. I would not have predicted Emily Lowen winning it because I didn't know her name a year ago. The safe bet I made was Justin Trudeau resigning and proroguing in the first quarter, which we got. But then, geopolitically, Trump ratcheting up the 51st state rhetoric, that definitely happened a lot after January 2nd. And it's why Mark Carney is prime minister these days. I had a lot of other Trump things, Trump invading Panama Canal Zone. He didn't do that, but in this past week, Venezuela is not the same, but he did do an invasion. Sorry, it's technically a military operation or a policing operation by the military in a foreign country.
The boots on the ground, even if temporary.
I had him having negotiated to end the Ukraine and Gaza wars. That was kind of optimistic. He did negotiate a truce in Gaza. Bullets and bombs are still flying every now and then. So we can maybe call that a half a point. Ukraine, he did try. You could say sincerely or not, but there were more peace talks in this last year than there have been. And there's possibly a path in the future to that war ending. And I also optimistically hope we would see the end of time changes and daylight savings times, but that just got forgotten. Yeah. And we still have to do the damn clocks.
I know you're a perennial optimist on this. I think you've predicted that like 2-3 years in a row now, and fortunately it's just yet to come true.
Just not going to bother this year, and maybe that's how we get it. Looking ahead is bleak. Jesus. There's a lot coming up. We have municipal elections in BC that I will be trying to get more Canby reports. I've recorded an interview that should be dropping tomorrow, or a pair of interviews that should be dropping tomorrow, so look forward to that. And I think we'll avoid the local election predictions here, at least in BC. Toronto is having a local election as well, and probably most of Ontario, but who follows the rest of Ontario municipal politics other than the people who live there? And trade is being renegotiated. So, and the midterms are coming up in the States. So let's start.
And
Go ahead.
Potentially the most consequential election in Canada. The Quebec is general election coming up in October, where right now the PQ's ahead by quite a bit, and that could set off a whole another sovereignty round.
Well, so let's get into putting our predictions down on paper. Let's start here in BC. The first prediction we have to make is who will win the Conservative leadership race. And I'm just going to say Diane Watts.
Is that like a shot in the dark? Or pick a name out of the hat?
Kind of. Like I'm looking at, we'll get into it in a bit on who's in and who's out. And there's not a lot out there. So I think she's probably got more of a machine if she actually enters. Like, if she doesn't enter, she won't win, and I'll be screwed there. But I could see her having a chance at it. I don't know. Who do you think will win?
I'm going to put my money down on Caroline Elliott. There's a not all that convincing draft Caroline Elliott, which really looks like a Caroline Elliott soft launch social media account out there promoting her and stuff. So it hasn't officially announced, but I think there's a very strong chance in the next week or two that she's actually going to make it official. I think largely she's going to win because she's both kind of in touch with where a lot of the base is, but can also have, somewhat broader appeal and might be able to bring more people into the party. Does fairly charismatic, does reasonably well on interviews and stuff.
Federally, I think we'll see a Conservative leadership race with Pierre Poilievre facing an increasingly hostile party at his convention coming up following the seat crossings we've seen in the last, which we didn't even put in our show notes here.
Well, the last one happened right before we sat down and recorded our last episode of the year.
Oh, okay.
On that,
yeah.
I did chat. We did talk about the Michael Ma crossing on that, or at least it was in the show notes.
Yes,
for us
we
to
did.
talk about. I'm going to take a slightly different perspective on this. I'm pretty sure Pierre Poilievre's going to be able to get through the leadership review, even if there's some souring on him. There's nobody's organizing, from what I can tell, a effort to oust him from the party, which would often need to be there, and still has quite a strong position with the base. So, odd stuff can happen, and he is, been somewhat wounded since the couple floor crossers, but I would say he's going to be able to, hit the 70% or 75% kind of soft target on that needed to stay in. And if there's one thing we've learned from the last couple years of leadership fights is that the caucuses are pretty cowardly when it comes to actually getting their act together and ejecting someone. And with someone who has a strong grip on the Conservative Party as Pierre, I don't think he's going to be going anywhere. So don't know if he's going to be great if there is an election called, but I would, absent losing another election, I don't think he's going to lose his seat or lose his job. On
that angle, I think if he does drop, or hell, even if he's, just wounded slightly by a slightly weaker, below 80 leadership review, that we start seeing some snap elections called. So I'm going to put out there 3 snap elections, one federally, one provincially here in BC, and another in Alberta. Starting federally, I think Mark Carney will be thirsty for a stable majority rather than one where he either has to rely on Elizabeth May or like everyone showing up all of the time, which is even becoming an issue here in BC. And with a weak Conservative Party and a new leader in the NDP, it'll be easy pickings for him to get back a full majority. Now, that'll probably have to come at the cost of a few Conservative seats, as I think the NDP can recover a bit. I'm not going to say they get up to the 20s or 30s in seats, but maybe they get back to official party status the rules way by hitting a dozen seats. Provincially here in BC, similar logic for David Eby. A couple MLAs being sick means I can't pass bills is going to become an issue because he does have a couple MLAs who are dealing with health issues, and they can vote remotely, but that's not ideal continually in these debates. So the temptation for him to engineer a defeat and challenge a new Conservative leader and an untested Green leader could help him. And based on how that's all playing out, I could see him pulling off a majority if people are still a bit edgy about US influence and the economy and everything. And then Danielle Smith just wanting to avoid all the separatist referendums and just plow ahead. But that might backfire on her. And that's where I think the NDP could pull off a victory like the 96 BC NDP, where they win a majority of seats without the plurality of the votes. And that would be a very interesting result.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree on the BC election in particular on that, because just looking at 338, there's a 4-point gap. That's margin of error between the BC NDP and the Conservatives on there, and that's after 6 months of Conservative Party dysfunction and internal fighting. If they get even a halfway decent leader, that's probably going to tighten up some, and I don't think it makes any sense to roll the dice for the NDP on a snap election this year when things are so close. The NDP's been in power so long, and they've kind of exhausted the enthusiasm, and are kind of in a little bit of the same position as the Liberals in Newfoundland were, where they might be up in the polls pre-election, but if it comes down to it in an actual campaign, people may be reminded of why they've started to grow a little tired of the NDP and the government, and particularly with some topics that I think are going to be much more prominent in the BC political discourse in the next year or so. That's aren't going to be the NDP's strongest suit. I just don't see the case for them rolling the dice on such a narrow outcome, which could backfire on them as much. So putting the marker down, no BC election. Federally, I'm not entirely convinced of your argument, but because it is also similarly fairly close with, right now the 338 most likely outcome projections has 32% of a Liberal plurality with and a 26% of a Liberal majority. The Conservatives are a couple points behind, but it isn't actually they're 1 point behind on the average, and Liberals get a little bit of a boost from their more efficient vote. But it's also kind of tight, but could see a higher likelihood on that. So I'm not sure if I'm not necessarily going to throw a marker down federally on an election or not, but I'm just not sold on the the argument for a federal election this year unless things change.
But we do know there will be a election in Toronto and Quebec. I'm not going to pretend to have any insight into Toronto, so I'm not taking a stand there. But I will say that the polls hold and the PQ easily takes its majority government. The situation with the CAQ they're acting so desperate and making so many weird, like they launched this whole new constitution that no one seems to like or want
Also,
for Quebec.
They just had it's not an MLA, their MLA equivalent, Member National Assembly. They'd one of their caucus members just got arrested for drunk driving today. So, not going great.
And meanwhile, the Liberals had Pablo Rodriguez as their leader, but then he had to resign because of scandal and allegations of corruption and bribery in his leadership bids. So, they're not in a good state.
Which is just so on brand for the Quebec Liberals.
And so that leaves the PQ, unless Quebec Solidaire I haven't heard about for a while. And I don't know that they've been in position to challenge for majority. So
it is Quebec though. Weird things happen. The CAQ kind of came out from nowhere. They'd had a seat or two in the election before they won power. So weird things can happen in Quebec. It's a very dynamic political situation there, just all the time. But yeah, I think I'm also going to take the save money until PQ win on that.
Yeah, and if they do, they'll start plans for a sovereignty referendum in the next couple of years, which probably won't go well for them, but it will be fun for the country in a not fun way. Let's look abroad. You have some thoughts about the America?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'm just going to say on the trade front that I'm pretty sure Trump's going to announce that he intends to withdraw from USMCA or CUSMA, whichever version of the acronym you'd prefer on that. Now, the way the treaty is actually written is that it's up for negotiation this year, but if it doesn't get renewed, it lasts for another 10. But I don't know, things are finicky enough, and enough of a temperamental disposition on this that I wouldn't put it past it to just pull out right away versus not renewing it. But I, at the very least, expect he's going to announce the intent to not renew it.
Yeah, I'll second that prediction. It seems safe enough.
And yeah, midterms this November in the US. The Democrats are probably going to win the House, but the Republicans are going to retain control of the Senate.
I don't even want to make a guess on the midterms because I'm not optimistic that they will happen, let alone how they will turn out. I'm not predicting they won't happen, but just it makes me unhappy to think about.
Just in a broader sense, the last couple of years have been real case of the tail risks have gotten unacceptably likely, and that's just not a fun spot to be in on just a whole range of fronts. On that somewhat related note, I also going to guess the U.S. is going to continue its Latin America and regime change, Monroe Doctrine 2.0, and finally do what JFK never could and invade Cuba and try and oust the regime there.
Thoughts on Greenland? Neither of us put anything down.
Neither of us put anything down. I'm going to say the U.S. is going to make a formal offer for Greenland to join the U.S., but I'm not going to put a marker down on what the carrots or sticks in that one are going to be.
Fair. I will grant that boots on the ground is a formal offer that they can't refuse, just so to speak. Yeah, I don't know. I do think they're going to work to end the Ukraine war. Things already seem in motion for that, so I'll repeat that prediction from last year. And I won't make a prediction about whether NATO lasts the year, but I think we will see the emergence of a new like NATO minus USA alliance, defense alliance, start to come into fruition between like Canada, Europe, and maybe it includes Australia, New Zealand, or allies like that. Some kind of alternative.
It's going to be kind of interesting on that. I could see the argument for trying to bring those countries in, but that is also a bit of a strategic nightmare trying to defend an island nation or continent that's on the other side of the world from the bulk of the alliance, particularly if you lose the power projection capabilities that are the U.S. Navy.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's actually an interesting strategic question on what the cost benefit is of pulling Australia and New Zealand into such an arrangement.
I'm not guaranteeing they get in or even suggesting necessarily, but just the opportunities are there. Let's end our predictions there, because thinking about global politics these days is uncomfortable and unhappy. Let's have a little more fun here in BC, where things continue a little more routinely. The BC Conservative leadership race is underway. We have more names of people who are not running than we have of names running. It feels like, as both Aaron Gunn and Gavin Dew over the holidays said they have no plans and will not run for leadership.
Yeah, Gavin Dew not running's not a huge surprise. I could have seen that being like a 50-50 thing if you'd asked my prediction on whether or not he would run a couple months ago on that. Aaron Gunn is an interesting one because he was fairly involved in the BC Conservative Party up off the ground on that, has a higher profile than I think pretty much anyone else on the list that we've talked about the last time we recorded or we'll be talking about today. And beyond that has a lot of the energy that I think is going to motivate the base, and he would have been the very clear front runner if he'd decided to join the leadership race. The announcement video he did on this leaned pretty heavily on federal conservative reasons not to depart from his seat as an MP. But it is definitely going to be a much different dynamic with him out than with him in.
Mm-hmm. On the official leadership news, we did learn this week that the Conservative Party has formed a committee to decide the rules on selecting a new leader. And so part of the reason we don't have a lot of concrete names yet is they don't have a process out. And it's hard to decide to run when you don't know what the timeline is, what the amount you have to fundraise is, how many signatures you have to get. All of those nitty-gritty details will be decided soon. They do emphasize they want to rush, do this process quickly, particularly if David Eby eyes a snap election. But it's kind of in the same realm as the federal Greens, where we are told a leadership race will happen, but the actual race has not yet begun. Though I have more faith in the BC Conservatives, despite their relative inexperience at running leadership races, to actually do one sooner.
Yeah, I agree. They actually seem to have their eye on the ball and where they want to go on this one, as opposed to the Green Party that is, I don't even know what they're doing. They seem in no rush or interest to really do much of anything.
So we have a few names of people still moving around. Harman Bangu, MLA, says he will most likely run. Social Conservative in Surrey, who was elected in the last election. We'll see how he does. Peter Milobar, who's been an MLA since 2017, in Kamloops, is considering a run as well. He'd be on the more moderate side, likely. And then some business folk, as are want to run for a Conservative leadership race. Yuri Fulmer, the Chancellor of Capilano University. Daryl Jones, the the Daryl's Deal guys from Save On Ads wants to run, because nothing says in touch with the moment like running a grocery store executive for political party leadership. And one who I didn't realize was out there until I looked at Wikipedia today, Warren Ham, a contractor from Rossland, BC, has said he is running, and actually is the first to have said he is running. Because in his words, we need fewer legal professionals and political science lifers in politics.
So like your classic, outside the political system, somewhat populist approach on that. I don't think he's going anymore on this. Of these, Yuri Fulmer seems to be the one that has the most juice. Dropped a professionally done launch video. Seems to have at least has a structured message that he's putting out, and it, from what I've heard, at least has some competent organization around him. So with people who know what they're doing. So he, of these three, I think, are the one to watch. But yeah, kind
Fulmer
of the
did.
Going to be probably competing a bit with Millibar for the more moderate business focused, could have been a BC Liberal wing of that, or lane, depending on the metaphor you want to run with that on that.
Yeah, Fulmer did run in the 2024 election in West Vancouver Sea to Sky and was defeated by Jeremy Valeriote. Fulmer got 35.6% of the vote to Valeriote's 38%. So he has tried to get elected, which is a credit to someone trying to become leader of a party. But yeah, didn't quite hold the seat for the Conservatives there. It was formerly held by BC Liberal Jordan Sturdy. So yeah, we'll keep our eye on that race as it starts to take shape. And on the even further end of the aisle, man, 1BC just like had a hell of a couple weeks right after we finished recording our interview and logged off for the holidays, as they, fast played the Conservative drama in 10 days.
Yeah, so it was a wild bit where all of a sudden, kind of out of the blue, if you weren't super tuned into what the fringe fourth party was doing, had Tara Armstrong, the other MLA there, announced she'd lost confidence in Dallas Brody. The party said they'd voted to remove Brody. Brody said no, and then there's a whole fight about whether or not she was actually the leader of it. Accusations from the party board about her trying to inappropriately gain access to the confidential information or privileged systems of the party. Basically, take what happened over like the two months for the BC Conservatives and compress it and add a little more craziness to it, and that was more or less the vibe of those 10 days.
Yeah, and most of them decided to post through it, and
it is nothing if not a party of posters.
Yeah, and that actually turned out to be one of the key issues. So Brody was accused of being a bully who yelled at staffers. Wyatt Claypool one of the staffers came to her defense, saying, no, actually, the only time she yelled is when she was calling out this guy, Othman McLuffy, who is too right-wing for Dallas Brody, and was called a neo-Nazi who came in from the USA to help 1BC, and Brody determined that he was too right-wing for the party, and others like Tim Thielman said, no, he's our kind of people, and he's just making jokes online. And she's like, no, even we have limits. And they're like, no, you can't cancel people in the anti-cancel culture party. And it kind of blew up for a bit from there. Tara Armstrong fully left the party. question of whether they have party status has been resolved by the fact that they only have one MLA, Dallas Brody now. Tara Armstrong has been scrubbed from the 1BC website. And so she'll get to sit as an independent. They have lost their caucus funds. It's real impressive to like create and lose a party in a year.
Yeah, so about the only thing that they've managed to claw themselves back from in this is that at the end of those 10 days, Brody put out a statement saying, after some negotiations, we've reached a deal and I'm back in leader. Paraphrasing roughly on that, but that was the gist of it. And yeah, so the party has a leader now, but that seems to be all it has. Several of the people fighting with Brody were, made the main staff members and have resigned. So, plus they don't have the official party resources anymore. They're getting from the legislature on that, so they're probably going to have trouble paying staff, if they have any left at this point. So, Pyrrhic victory for Brody on that, but they are going to keep on trotting, but I think the chances that 1BC sticks around is dramatically decreased.
I think the big thing for them is how the Conservative Party of BC leadership race plays out. I think 1BC is going to struggle real hard until that is resolved. And if the Conservative Party of BC, goes or stays a little more populist, there may be more space to include those 1BC types. And if the Conservative Party of BC switches to be a little closer to where like BC Liberals and BC United were, 1BC has an opportunity, unfortunately. In the meantime, the energy is not in their corner, and so that's probably for the better. It was just very funny to watch, and like, there's a lot more detail to this, and this is going to be the one time that I'll probably actually link to the Western Standard, because they're the kind of
They had the inside,
actually,
they had the contacts and stuff to get the scoop on it. But they did publish a pretty decent breakdown on kind of the play-by-play on what happened there. So we will throw a link into that, because this actually seems to be one of the areas where they seem to have their reporting straight on.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of what's happened in the last couple weeks since we'd discussed. Looking forward for the year in BC politics. It's going to be an interesting one. We've got the leadership race coming up, but there's also going to be a bunch of big issues and continued debates from the last year that I think are going to occupy a lot of airtime. There's the continued fallout from the Cowichan decision. There's the promise by David Eby after a different court decision to revisit the UNDRIP legislation. Decriminalization pilots up at the end of the month, and it sounds like it's not going to be renewed, but that'll be a formal decision that'll be coming up in the coming weeks. So a lot going to be going on. And that is...
Well, and the major projects that BC has promised, that bill is actually notably not implemented yet, according to Rob Shaw and Vaughn Palmer reporting on this, as the government's rush to put it through actually burned a lot of bridges that they needed to have they pissed off a lot of indigenous nations that are now like threatening lawsuits and slowing down the law meant to speed up projects. So in their rush to speed things up, they fucked things up, and we'll have to sort that out as well.
Indeed, that's something to keep an eye on, both provincially and federally, is how those sorts of speed things up pieces of legislation go. The federal one was also the one that enacted the Major Projects Office, so it's had a little more success to show, but as we've noted, most of what's been announced are basically things that were already pretty far along in the process, and neither of them have really been tested on truly new suggestion or new projects that are coming up. And that is going to be something to watch for sure, because this last year was a pretty big wake up on the need to fix the things that are slowing down the economy, make the economy much more resilient and less trade with the U.S. dependent. And also, the last year or two, and going forward in particular, it's pretty clear that what matters increasingly geopolitically is just hard power, and that is something Canada's going to have to build up, and the economic foundations of that are pretty important, and whether or not the federal government and the provincial governments actually get their act together on that front is going to be the real test of how 2026 goes.
I'm going to be curious if when the speech from the throne drops here in BC on February 12th, if we see any shift in direction from David Eby or some like broader vision that, inspires or like suggests what he's going to do. It's interesting. The speech from the throne drops on a Thursday, then before Family Day, and then the Tuesday after Family Day is Budget Day, as I look at the calendar. So look for some joyous content in February, at least from this podcast, when we get into that.
Putting it the day before Family Day does not exactly inspire confidence that it's something that's going to be a new direction that's announced on it. And I'm also skeptical that would be what's going to happen, just because we're like, what, a year pretty much into the new era of just about everything, and the highest energy towards big change, new directions, all of that was this time last year through May. And Eby made some noises in that direction, past the couple bills we were talking about, but if he had it in him, he would have done it by now, and I just don't see any sign that he actually has it in him, or it's going to come out in the next couple months.
Well, one thing we will be looking forward to federally for sure is a by-election in the riding in Toronto of University Rosedale, as Chrystia Freeland has announced her end to her parliamentary career tentatively tomorrow, Friday the 9th. This was an interestingly evolving story. I can't remember if we talked on the pod last year about what is her job besides MP, because she had taken this advisor to the Prime Minister on Ukraine role.
A special envoy, I think it was, officially on that.
And she was going to become the president of the Rhodes Foundation or the Rhodes Trust in the UK in June. And now it turns out earlier this week, Volodymyr Zelensky announced Chrystia Freeland will be a special economic advisor on a voluntary basis to her. At that point, she is still MP, which was very weird as an announcement. She followed that with, I'll be resigning in the coming weeks, and that quickly became Friday.
Well, between the announcement and her saying that, there were a bunch of questions, particularly from the Conservatives, about the potential conflict of interest for working for a foreign government, even one that's an ally, while also serving as an MP, which led the whole thing to be overshadowed by conflict of interest and when is she resigning questions, rather than doing a nice smooth transition to a new role. So that whole thing was just sloppy, and the government took some political hits and got knocked off its message in a way it didn't need to. If it had just I don't know, thought about this for a second or two and planned accordingly?
I think what potentially happened is Zelensky didn't care, or he didn't get a memo of when this should be announced, so he had just announced it on his own without her timeline being consulted, and that kind of caught everyone in Canada off guard.
Even so, the immediate response should have been, yes, that's what I'm doing, and I will be resigning my seat immediately.
Yeah, because the Parliament's not even sitting, so who cares? Other than Mark Carney's almost majority, and the fact, I forget what the seat numbers are exactly right now, but he's like within one seat of majority. And so a by-election, even in a pretty safe riding, Chrystia Freeland got, I think, 50% there last time.
I thought it was 60%. North of 60.
Yeah. Yeah, because she picked up a bunch of NDP votes. But, she's usually getting 50 to 60% in that riding. And maybe a less prominent Liberal gets 45% in a by-election. But
alternatively, you run the by-election now, the NDP are still focused on their leadership race, and they're not really going to show up to that, and you can just dominate that, because Conservatives not getting elected in Toronto University, I think is the riding.
Yeah, and it's consistent with Carney's commitment to hold by-elections quick, which he did for Pierre Poilievre. So, also, from Ukraine's perspective, you should want your economic or your advisors to government to not also be collecting paychecks from other governments, I would think. Like, just all around, it was weird.
Yeah, and there's also just the question of, is Chrystia Freeland the best person to appoint as a special economic advisor?
Good Beaverton headline about her first recommendation being for them to cancel Disney+.
Yeah, she was, a very well-respected journalist before running for federal parliament, but, not as far as I know, not a person with, deep economics background beyond reporting on that, but not one with, I think, formal economics training.
Well, it's an interesting next pivot for her career in any case, but I look forward to the next Toronto Liberal to fill that seat. And otherwise federally, lots of little stories kind of came up in the interim, but I think the most amusing is that the federal gun buyback has officially launched. A pilot project is happening in Nova Scotia. They have collected 25 weapons that they have destroyed.
They were expecting the pilot project to bring in at least 200, so they're knocking it out of the park with a mere 12% of their target. And the CBC story doesn't say how much they've spent on this, but the last time numbers were publicized related to the buyback program, 65 million, if I recall correctly, had been spent, and at that point not a single gun had been collected. So, right now that puts it at somewhere on the order of 2.6 million, probably higher, dollars per gun collected. So, just real great work on the government's part. This is also 5.5-6 years after they announced the start of a program, and the minister in charge said to a constituent who was recording him that he didn't think the program would work at all.
Listen, with this pilot, they have flagged functional gaps in the online portal, which may have been challenging and confusing for some participants in the program. So they have learned some important lessons here.
A Government of Canada IT project didn't work out either. It's shocking. Well, I'm sure we'll get around to fixing it for several $1 million more in another decade.
It worked for 24 people. Actually, they don't say how many people brought in guns, just that 25 came in. So it may have only been like a dozen people with 2 or 3 each. In any case, amusing. I'm feeling tired. I have a, break for 2 weeks from work, only to just be full-time parenting and traveling. My travels to visit family in Alberta were good, but marked by flight delays, a car reservation that was closed when I arrived, so we had to just like luck out on getting a different car. And now back to work is just a flood of emails to deal with. So I think maybe we end it there for the week.
The circle back in the new year really caught up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that too. It's been a bit of a first week back.
Good to be back, Scott. I look forward to continuing the podcast through the year.
Yeah. Hopefully 2026 turns out to be a both an interesting and a good year for Canadian politics and, well, everything else. Should be a welcome change.
And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. Our intro music is Beautiful British Columbia by Serge Plotnikov. Politicos is a production of Leg and Boot Media. Audio editing provided by Jesse Woodward at listener-supported CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo. Learn more at chly.ca.